Inauspicious houses plus cruel planets. I often hear this called good placement, but this is still difficult. It's not like math where two negatives make a positive. Like of exalted Mars in the 12th house. You really want me to talk about that, don't you? Okay. So some people will say, stick a difficult planet, a cruel planet in an inauspicious house, and it's like they cancel each other out. That is a thumb rule that you hear very often. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. Just like the idea of saying, oh, well, you've got a debilitated planet retrograde, so therefore it must be good. Well, we don't know that. We got to look at many other things in that regard. But there are all these thumb rules that astrologers have spouted off that were just meant to be study aids that people have taken and turned into a Bible of astrology, which is why astrology is in the current state that it's in. It's getting better. It's getting much better. So we've got to have a little bit of positivity there. But let's say, for example, you take Saturn in good dignity and you stick it in the 6th house. That can show you very effectively manage your health, your enemies. Let's say you take that Saturn, you stick it in good dignity in the 12th house. That means you very effectively and methodically manage your debts, your expenses. Gives you great capacity to focus inwardly. So in that regard, yes, taking a cruel planet and sticking it in one of these difficult houses helps you to manage those things. What's the theory? Well, let's say you take Jupiter and you stick it in the 6th house. Well, why doesn't that work? Because the 6th house represents your diseases and your enemies. And Jupiter is a planet of opportunity. It's a planet of optimism. It's a planet of growth. Do you want your enemies, do you want your diseases to grow? Not necessarily. But again, that's just a thumb rule, and we can use that as a foundation, but we have to compare a lot of other things in the chart, first and foremost. When we have an exalted Mars in the 12th house, okay, what can that mean? That can mean that you've got a capacity. So exalted Mars in the 12th house, so we're going to have a Aquarius ascendant for that to happen, which means Mars is going to rule over the 4th house. No, excuse me. Mars is going to rule over the 3rd house, and Mars is going to rule over the 10th house. All right, so what that's going to tell us? Well, having an exalted Mars in the 12th house generally tells us that one is going to be very logical about how they deal with their expenses, generally speaking. Having an exalted Mars in the 12th house can show a person who benefits from contemplative processes like self-inquiry. Having an exalted Mars in the 12th house can show us that maybe one's siblings or one's peers or one's brothers help us to manage our expenses, our losses. Having the 10th Lord going into the 12th house, sometimes that can show a person who has a lot of skills working behind the scenes. It can show a person who might work through the internet. And it's going to approach it in a very Martian, logical way. So there are numerous things that we can consider when we're looking at that. And it's really going to depend upon what are the other influences to that 12th house Lord. What are the houses that we're talking about here? And what is the ascendant? As a Aquarius ascendant, you might not necessarily want your 10th Lord in the 12th. It depends on you, and it depends on the rest of the chart. Maybe you don't like your siblings, and so you want them in the 12th house. It all depends on all these different things. So in a way, thumb rule, it can be like a mathematical equation. But there's so much more to look at that to do it that way, you're going to miss a lot of the nuances, and more often than not, you're going to be incorrect. All right. Did that answer your question, Kim? Or is there something more specific you wanted me to talk about? Exalted Mars ruling the 3rd and the 12th. It means the person has a lot of hidden things that they enjoy doing that they don't want the public to know about. How about that? Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and conclude here for today.